I didn't mind when I got out into the world being part of, the drag scene, and, that was just kind of a fun thing to do. But I never wanted to cut anything off or become something else.
Sure.
So and fortunately nobody was there.
The boobs.
Yeah, I did want the boobs, I admit. I thought it'd be fun to have them. And,
Hello, welcome back to Free Indeed Radio. I'm Brandon.
And I'm John.
And today I wanted you guys to hear about John's life as a homo.
Well, that sounds nice.
No,
Do we put that on the front page?
You might as well. No, obviously this isn't going to be the whole thing. We're going to continue it. But I think it's worth getting the story out in a semi-palatable format before we get some sort of a higher production dealie, or you know what I'm talking about. So,
well, the story's the same. So no matter how it comes out, it is who I am. So I appreciate you wanting to tell the story.
So tell us about the life leading up to you walking away and just kind of doing your own thing.
Well, that'd be from birth to just after marriage. Then
might as well.
That's a long journey of about 25 years. So, well, I'll tell you, I was born in Memphis, Tennessee. My parents were in the military. My dad was. So I was born in a Navy hospital, and I'm the only person you'll probably ever meet who can show you on the birth certificate that it says trailer park. So if that helps you with getting to know my sense of humor,
classy.
There it is too, and it even has a space number and everything. It's fantastic. Yeah, I don't have an address. It's trailer park outside of Memphis. So that's probably what went wrong more than anything. I clearly blame my mother for doing that, but no, I'm kidding. So, but we moved to San Diego when I was a kid, and my dad was in the military station there for a number of years. And through that life, that's where I met the men that I started having sex with at an age of 7 as a kid.
So what do you mean met the men that you started having sex with? Did you initiate that, or like what was
that
about?
Not at first. It was something that was
people coming to you, or like...
Yeah, known through my dad's friends, things like that. People, men that saw me as a nice kid and a gentle kid, which I was, always a very gentle person.
Were these high school kids, or?
No, adult men,
Okay.
20s, I would say. I mean, I didn't know age back then. I was just a kid. In Boy Scouts, there was the one scout leader that was, the great guy, and he was another person that I was sexually active with. And the interesting part about it all, Brandon, is that because I related to it, I mean, it actually wasn't something that made me feel bad or think there was anything really wrong. It was a relatable experience. So I had no reason to talk about it or do anything.
Sure, it wasn't
about
like this horrific violating thing, because
No.
there was no frame of reference.
No, it was always very, it was actually very friendly and gentle. It was a nice experience.
As nice as it can be.
Well, I mean, for what I knew, it wasn't bad. So if it wasn't bad, then it was okay. And that's kind of all I knew. And then
You probably wouldn't have thought of it as abuse at the time, but then again, we rarely do.
Well, and I know this is hard for people to hear, but I don't think of it that way even today. People like me to think of myself as abused or try to put that on me today, but I don't identify with that at all. Mostly completely because God's gotten me through all of that. So there's no need to go back and relabel my life. I know what it was. I know what happened. I know what I felt, whether it was good or bad, pleasurable or not. and I came through it. The things that were not pleasurable as I grew up, and had more and more sex with different men, was the feeling of rejection, as in I'm not really theirs. So most of the time, at least that I knew, the guys were married or had girlfriends, because we went camping together, the families did, or in groups, big groups or whatever like that, or neighbors. So I knew who they knew. I might have even been friends with their kids, but it still occurred, But then there was that sense, especially if they were single and they made it sound so approving, but then I wasn't needed later. So I didn't know how to really handle that.
Did these men kind of like ascribe to the free love thing in the 60s, or like was
that long ago?
No.
It was.
Well, they would have been 20.
Yeah, so it would have been, well, I guess it was late 60s, 70s, yeah. So there could have been some of that. I don't think I was self-aware enough or aware enough of life, as a little boy to even care. When you see somebody who wants to do it. I can remember going camping and there was a man in a shower, and that's what he was doing. There were other boys my age, around 10 or so, that he was doing this with, and that's what he was doing, at this campground. So it was like, oh, let's participate in that. I'll just join in because that's what I'd done before. So I did identify with the sensations and the attractions and the physical presence of a man. I looked at a man's body and liked it, and felt drawn to it and wanted to touch that and be a part of that. And I think because I was a kid, it was always fascinating that an adult was so different than I was. So that's how the connection happened. Some people have experiences, but they don't identify with it. They don't connect with it. It doesn't mean anything. It's like this, instead of it coming together like that and making me feel like that was who I am, And they didn't have terms like gay and all of that kind of thing. It was just something that I liked,
This might be a bit of a hypothetical, but, it's entirely a hypothetical. But do you think that if you would have had the same kind of experience in today's more gender fluid, everything is okay, and they would have put terms on it and everything, how do you think that would have affected you, if at all?
Well, I think it would have affected me greatly, because today a kid doesn't stand a chance. If they're sexualized at a young age, and now they can go and express that and even talk about it, and then somebody's going to be right there to tell them that there's something else, or this is who you now are. I think it would have been much more difficult. I mean, other people would say, well, but then you were hiding it. Because as I grew up, it didn't go away, as a teenager, and then going through high school and graduating, it was always there. And it was, picking up speed, if you will, as I began to mature and want to know more about sexuality. It's not like I wanted to learn about sex. I was just involved with it. So it was, again, it was just something.
If it's something that's
did.
in your life, you're gonna eventually learn more about it just by proxy, just by what you already know.
Yeah. So having more and more labels or more places would have definitely pushed me in the wrong direction, because I can assure you that this whole transgender theories and all that kind of thing, just to even say or express even for a moment a thought as a little boy, wanting to be a girl or acting like it or whatever, that I can only imagine they would have grabbed me and sent me down that path. That would have been the most horrible thing ever. I didn't mind when I got out into the world being part of the drag scene, and that was just kind of a fun thing to do. But I never wanted to cut anything off or become something else.
Sure.
So nobody, and fortunately nobody was there.
The boobs.
Yeah, I did want the boobs, I admit. I thought it'd be fun to have them, and because they're fun.
Well, I don't know a single dude who hasn't thought, like, if I was in a chick's body, all I would do is play with my boobs all day long,
Right. I mean, yeah. So it would be at least something about me that would be attractive, if not necessarily sexually, but necessarily sexually. But at least something that somebody could relate to. Like, okay, if all else fails, open your shirt and now you got boobs. Oh, we're friends.
So tell me more about high school life then. What did that look like for you?
Well, high school life was scattered all over the place because I started in Eugene and then went to New York and went to a couple of high schools there and then back to Springfield. So I was in, I think, 5 high schools for the 4 years.
Okay.
Because 9 through 12 was the standard back then. So the classes were huge. I was a little kid. I was not a big, I'm not a big person now, but I was even smaller then. I mean, I didn't hit 100 pounds, I don't think, until I was well into high school. Puberty came very late. So all the guys were ahead of me, 16 years old and you're still looking like a 10-year-old. It was just not good. So that kind of weighed on me. And back then you showered together because that's how they did things. So it was a strange thing. I mean, I think it was 16. It could have been a little bit younger than that when it finally got started and got somewhere, But I never could grow the mustache or, the facial hair. I'm trying this now, but, could never really do any of that. So, and I wasn't big and muscular like the other guys, because I hung out with friends that my friends were athletic, wrestlers and things like that. So
was that important to you to look that way?
Well, it was important to me that they looked that way, and I was attracted to them, but not knowing if they would receive that well, not knowing how they would feel, because it wasn't like trying to date somebody. It was just trying to connect and be that friend, but be near their masculinity. What I felt was missing, I wanted from them that I could get near them. But I didn't, it wasn't always on my mind. It wasn't something that I just always thought about. That happened later. It was just the way it was. I was a good kid. I was a nice kid. I mean, I got into my share of trouble. I was wasn't always a good kid. When I was away from my parents or something, there were some bad things that happened. Unfortunately, I didn't get arrested for them because they didn't catch me.
What are you talking about?
Oh, I was like to be a little vandal and hurt things and stuff like that. So it was definitely me inside rebelling against the hurt that was inside.
Hurt things? Like,
well, especially cats. I hated cats. So,
well, I mean, who doesn't?
I mean, that seems normal. I'm sure that everybody would notice that.
So, like, you tortured cats?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you were to read the path to a sociopath, the description, I would probably fit into it. And I don't know why. And I couldn't tell you why at the time. There was a need for control. And I suppose my life was out of control, but as a kid, you don't know that. And you certainly couldn't talk about it.
Sure.
So that, you're just a problem child. But anyway, for the most part, though, I was always well behaved, military family, so I was very respectful of everybody that I met. And that was a sincere me. That's who I am. And I had a lot of friends in high school, 9 through 12, through school. I never got in fights, I didn't really get picked on, and if anybody tried, I could usually use my, what they called a silver tongue to get out of it. There was a way out through words, so that's what I would do.
Was it like a manipulative thing, or was it like cut straight to your core and insult you, like to the things that you're most insecure about, or was it like quick conflict resolution? Or
it was more probably, I don't remember a lot of it. There's a lot of things that are gone, but I think it was more the conflict resolution. I was always out to make you my friend. So even if they were angry with me or something like that, I could turn that around somehow and make it to where you wouldn't want to fight. You wouldn't want to hurt me because I didn't want to hurt them. Not that I could, but I couldn't hit somebody in the face to save my life. I've only done that like once or twice in my life, and I was horrified what I could have done to them and how badly my hand hurt. I was like, I will never do this again. I can't. I just can't. So I was well liked, and I had good years. And I had friends that, I dated while I was in high school, dated girls, and enjoyed that, and had lots of girlfriends, especially as I got out of high school. But I also had guys that I had sex with that would play with, even though they had their girlfriends. But again, you didn't talk about that part. You just did it and went on with your day.
Sure.
So
business as usual.
Yeah, so I did a lot of going on with my day.
So then, where did Jesus come in?
Well, I accepted him when I was 16, when my parents had separated. We were living in New York, and had gone to a church out there that my mom and her sister planned, or whatever it was. I don't know, because she was the adult, and I was just there on this adventure, getting away from my dad because it was a bad situation, very bad. And then accepting Christ, and then being baptized in Holy Spirit, and all of those things, my life began to change. High school was a nightmare there. That was at 16, like I was saying, and I just hated being there.
What made it a nightmare?
Well, the classes, the high schools were like 5,000 kids in this one high school. The schools are just huge. And nobody wanted to know me, and I didn't necessarily want to know anybody. It was interesting because I would tell people I'm from Oregon, and the kids would sincerely ask if we used the same money. They had no idea. They asked me if there were roads everywhere, if there were cities. It was
really,
yeah. I mean, and they were sincere. That I was like this because I didn't talk like them, so they could tell I wasn't from there. So I was just a
commodity.
A sideshow almost. Like, wow, this is so bizarre. You're from Oregon. They learned about the Oregon Trail and never got off it. It's just crazy. No, the Donners lived years ago. We're not eating people anymore. There's restaurants. So it was just an experience I didn't want to have. I loved the Lord just completely and totally. He's just came into my heart and protected me and watched over me, and protected me from people who wanted to hurt me, because that's all I talked about. That's all I wanted to talk about.
What was all you talked about?
Jesus. He was it. I mean, I had one girl say, if you love him so much, why didn't you marry him? And I said, well, if I could, I would, because he's that good, and you should know that. And I had one time where a kid tried to hit me when we were walking through Kmart. And I just had this little voice in my head, the Holy Spirit said, move your hands to your stomach. So I moved my hands like this. And this great big kid, had to be over 6 feet tall. As he walked by, he reached back and swung and hit me in the hands. Had I not moved my hands, I would have been really hurt. But I knew that God was with me. And I knew that whatever the situation around me was, I didn't look at it. It's just that wonderful faith that you wish you could hold on to forever. Well, not that you can't, but it's like when you see that, I knew that God was with me. So I just wasn't afraid. So anyway, we moved back to Springfield, where I eventually graduated at Thurston in 1978. So even with Jesus in my life, though, I still had these feelings and thoughts
of same-sex attraction and sexual thoughts towards men. Was there a level of self-hatred that was still involved in that, or like? Well,
it wasn't a self-hatred. I didn't hate me for doing what I did with people.
No, that's not what I'm like. Were there any other kind of overbearing or overly present feelings along with the same-sex attraction that you didn't know how to deal with, or?
Well, I guess throughout my life I had wondered about them, and thinking about getting married and having these thoughts started to play its part. That was even as a kid, you know. But as I grew up and knowing Jesus, and then really trying to learn more about him and what he had for me, it did become a bit more of a struggle, even though I still continued. It wasn't like this real battleground necessarily. It was just, well, if I'm changing, then I don't know how to stop, what to change into. That was it. And then I thought, well, if I'm going to get married, then, you know, I don't want to do this with boys or other guys, right? I mean, that's not what you do. And I knew I wanted to get married and have kids. I knew that for my life, you know. That was my thing. So it was just always something that was with me that I could just not step away from, because it was there. And then if I met somebody who was also into that, then something would naturally happen. So I was like, okay, now what?
Was that kind of, did you encounter that a lot?
Yes. Yeah, it's surprising how many people, you know, you start to learn how to connect without using words, and or having certain words that do connect you, or make sure you're in a situation where you can test the water, if you will, and then it comes true or comes through or something like that. So I guess it got really difficult at 18 when I graduated, because I was 18 and a half when I graduated, and I couldn't talk to anybody about what was going on. I had a lot of Christian friends.
About what was going on?
In my head.
Okay.
The same-sex attraction. And I was learning more and more about God, and going to church, you know, all of a sudden the messages about excuse me, God hating homosexuals was hitting home. And it began to really split me in half, because I just couldn't understand. It had been so good, and now it was getting really bad. And, you know, the more I was around that thinking and that speech, the more, that's when I began to hate myself and get lost. Because again, there was nobody to talk to. There was no us at that time, you know, and certainly nobody wanted to understand it. So that's where it really got hard. That's why I joined the Navy.
And you did that right out of high school?
Pretty close. I was 18 or 19, something like that. Must have been 19, I guess.
I've actually always wondered this. Did you join the Navy because of the whole, like, everyone in the Navy is gay thing?
Well, they didn't talk like that. No, I did not. However, when I got...
Maybe I'll get some sailor tail.
Yeah. Well, that's why when I went to join the submarine service, that's when those kind of jokes and stuff would come out, you know. 180 guys go down, but only 90 are standing up. But that's just one of those things. But I was there to try to get out of it, you know, and I was running from everybody else around me that knew that I was struggling. And Katie, who ended up being my wife, she was the one person that even to this day has never walked away from me from beginning to end. I mean, her parents haven't either, but to say that, is there somebody who was always in the background or with you or whatever, it was her. And in fact, she even moved to Hawaii. Of course, she's Hawaiian, but she moved from California or Oregon to Hawaii while I was stationed in Hawaii, so we could be together. You know, that didn't help. It didn't change anything. Now I was having more sex than ever, and now we were starting to party and going out all the time, and I still knew that I wanted to be close to the Lord, but somehow I wasn't connecting with that anymore.
So did you marry Katie and then go into the Navy?
No, I was in the Navy, then got out, and then we got married.
What was the circumstances of you leaving the Navy?
Well, there was a guy on the submarine who, for some reason, I don't know how it ever came about, he got it in his head and got permission to get the homosexuals. So he created a situation where he would have us alone and then something just enough would occur to where it would then end. Then that very same night, he went to the command and said, okay, I got all these guys.
So like a gay sting?
Yeah, yeah. And actually, for my part, it actually happened in a closet, which was kind of funny. And I actually didn't do anything. I was so afraid with him in there. He was a great big guy, and but he represented everything that I would normally just absolutely be after, every part of him. But nothing really major happened. I mean, I grabbed him, but that was it. I didn't do anything else. So anyway, at about 4 a.m, they did the military police came in and did their sweep and picked us up and arrested us and handcuffed us and took us in, and where a few hours later they began the court-martials to send everybody home.
So like for those who aren't military minded, what is a court-martial?
I was arrested for and charged with homosexuality, and I was now in court before a judge.
Facing what kind of consequences?
Being thrown out,
Oh, okay.
or I could have been put in the brig put in jail for the same thing.
Okay.
You know, loss of rate, losing your money, you know, knocked down, all these other kind of things.
So court-martials only apply to like military stuff. They don't apply to civilian.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was confused about that.
No, that's military court. So as I watched, I just, you know, I was scared to death, and you know, I knew that I could call on the Lord, and He was there with me. And the other guys all got general discharges, which means, you know, blah, you know, like, you were here, go away, nobody cares. But for me, it was, I was the last person, and the man in charge of the trial said, you know, John, you're a good young man, and this isn't something that needs to hurt your life. So they gave me an honorable discharge, so that I would have, you know, something good on my record and could say it was honorable and all that kind of good stuff. Not that I've ever needed it, but it's there.
Yeah, because you could have gotten a dishonorable discharge, and that's almost as bad as a felony nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about it to somebody. But on my separation paper, the DD 214, that's your final paper, it does say reason for separation. It would have said retirement or whatever. Mine says homosexual acts. So, and nowadays they're actually have changed it so much that I could actually apply to have that removed.
Really?
Yeah, and changed to just separated, but still an honorable. So it's a little bit hard to look at that piece of paper, and it's very hard to share it, like if I wanted to get a home loan under the VA. And I don't know why, it just is. I think because I don't want people to think of me as that. You know, that's not what I am or who I am.
Sure.
It's just what happened. So
what happened after that? You get discharged?
Yeah, then they flew me back. Well, actually, I was still in Guam for a while, had everything stolen, and that was just a raging mess. And things just in my mind got worse. Like, what am I going to do, and how am I going to handle this? So they flew me back to Portland, and I had to have my parents come and get me because I didn't know anybody else. And I just remember that my dad picked me up, and I don't think we had much to say to each other. You know, his disappointment was clear. So that's when it got even deeper. And it's like, you know, you people have known me, nobody's willing to help me, but you're very willing to be disappointed and to ridicule or whatever. You know, that's how it felt. It was just demeaning. So I just wanted to get away from it. You know, I just needed something new.
What kind of reception did you get from the church that you had grown up in?
Well, I didn't grow up in church.
Or that you had been attended before? Like, was there a home church that you and your family had gone to?
No.
Or anything like that?
No. We didn't go to church together as a family, except when I was young, when we were Catholic. They drug us to that stuff, but as a Christian, no. And I can't remember. I know I was going to an Assemblies of God somewhere, I think in Goshen, and that's where Katie and I believe I met her. So, but the details are fuzzy. I don't remember all of those kind of things. I wanted to go to church, but church wasn't my world. You know, it was just something that, again, that I did. But then the messages were something I didn't quite understand, and so it made it hard. But I had friends there. You know, all of my friends went to church, so that's what we did. Church was part of our lives. You know, being part of the youth groups or whatever for the time. I mean, it was a short time. And then, you know, we worked. As a kid, I always worked. I had a job at 16 and hadn't stopped. So then I began to date Katie's friends. Now that I know, we were all going to the same church. And so at one point I was dating 2 of them, and then it got down to 1, and then it got down to her. And so that was interesting. But anyway, she and I ended up getting married at her family's house. Beautiful place, you know, and the whole thing was done up very well. And things went well for a while. You know, it was good. I knew that I was happy. I understood the scriptures that said the 2 shall become 1. I absolutely got that, because I knew that I loved the Lord and He loved me. Now the love of the Lord is coming back, right? And really taking hold, because this other part of me was able to be subdued, or at least put away and not thought of or seen. Even though she knew about it. She always knew about it. And she said to me, I knew the risk going in. But she still went. So we had the kids, and it was amazing. And she didn't want to raise babies, because she wasn't into babies. She's like, send them back when they're 12. But then a short time after that, 5 years later or so, things began to change again. And then all of a sudden, the same-sex attraction took over heavy. It's like it came back so hard, I didn't know what to do with it. And now I really can't talk to anybody. I really have to hide.
Because now you're in really deep. You have a family and kids.
Right. And now this, again. So what do? You know, you try to figure it out. I went to I remember going to places. I drove to California to a reparative therapy place, you know, and I was going to get...
Really? What was that like?
Well, I never went through with it because I didn't agree with what they were doing. There was something about it. I think I knew the message of grace, but didn't know that's what it was, because I looked at what they were going to do and how they do it, and I said, this doesn't work. You can't shame me into or out of my shame. I mean, what is that about? But that's how it worked. And then, of course, there were all the other things that they did along with it. There was one place that had a live-in place, and it was all gay guys, but you were supposed to live in a room with 4 gay guys together, and you weren't allowed to touch. And if you were caught doing that, you were thrown out. Well, really?
Goodness, that just kind of sounds like a recipe for failure from the start.
It does, because it was all done.
Because they're already repressed, they're already there, they're in the same room together, they're covered in shame.
We're trying to be Jesus people, and now we've gone to this house of horror and going to be more Jesus-y so that we're less homo-y. It doesn't work. You know, there was no sense of love and grace. It was all about rules and doing what you're told. Well, if I had done what I was told, you know, I would either be dead or not worrying about same-sex attraction. You know, it would have just stopped. But it didn't. So after going through all of that searching and wishing and waiting and wanting and praying and God, take this away, and why won't you do this for me, and why do they say that you hate me, and if they do, it's either true that you hate me or you're going to take this away. because the two can't coexist. Well, neither one of them was true,
Right.
but I didn't know that. So I believed them, and then I began to believe it more and more. And then my friends from the worldly side, the non-Christian side, started telling me that I should appreciate who I am and what I am, and that, you know, Eugene, Springfield was too small of a town for me. I was always a big city kid, and I really was. But and then after a counselor, Christian counselor at a church, told me I should go ahead and get a divorce and do my own thing. So, because he didn't understand either. He couldn't get any closer to me than, you know, Mount Rushmore is. So I took that as God telling me it was okay to go. But then the rejection along the way, the people just saying, get away from us, get out of our lives, we hate you, you're going to hell, you're going to die, all of these things. That's what I eventually said, I need to get out of here. And I remember I was at work and I looked out a window and I saw clouds and I could see a silver lining, because in Eugene it's always a nasty cloudy day, right? But there was a silver lining that I hadn't paid attention to before. And I just said, this is the day I'm supposed to go. So I got up.
What were you doing in Eugene at the
Well,
time?
I was managing a warehouse for a business machines company. And I was young, but I was smart, talented. I was good at what I did. And this man had hired me because he liked the work I was doing at another place where he would shop. But I just went in and I said, guys, I have to go and I have to leave today. I won't be back. And I was apologetic and all of those things, but I knew if I didn't go, I would never get out of there. I wasn't going to survive Eugene. So I packed my car and in the trunk with whatever I could carry, whatever fit. I had $300 in my pocket, and I headed back to San Diego. And just began to live what I considered free.
So you went through with the divorce and left Eugene. Like, was that?
The divorce happened along the way.
Okay.
So it took a little bit of time, but we knew. We had worked out all of the details before. We were always very amicable. I remember the only thing we ever got any tension over was the microwave. Because back then, the microwave was pretty cool. So, like, who's going to have the microwave? But, you know, she got it, just so you know, which was right. And her parents were close by, and they never threw me away. They knew that I was hurting and in trouble. And they were insistent that I know that they were standing by me and their daughter and their grandkids. Like, even though this family has split, we haven't split from the family. So that was a lot, but I carried, you know, so much guilt and shame. And the weight was so heavy that now I began to just break free, if you will. And I went just completely off the rails sexually, but I was enjoying it. I thought it was a lot of fun, and I didn't have to think about anything while I was doing it, and it was just a lot of people. You know, it was a lot of places, a lot of people, and a lot of things. And then I tried to find happiness. Well, I did find happiness because I met Gary, who is the one person that he wasn't just after me sexually. It was like he wanted a partner, you know. We wore wedding rings, and that's how committed we were to each other. Back then, you couldn't get married, of course. But we still did our own thing, and that's what we believed in.
So where was God in all that to you?
Nowhere. By the time I left, I was pretty much done with, well, at least I thought I was done with God. I was convinced of what they said, that he didn't want me, and he didn't care. So I figured I'll just live until I'm dead and then fuck it. He doesn't care anyway, so why should I try to care? What part of me is there to worry about if he doesn't care about any part of me?
Mm-hmm.
And the message just continued to grow, you know. And I would see it on TV, and I just rebelled against these people. I hated everything about anybody who had to do with anything of God or a church or whatever. I didn't really care what building you walked out of. You were just garbage in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's how you were, and that's the God you serve, I'm out. And I was out. I became very militant. I mean, my idea of a church, when I would see a church, you know, like we travel, Gary and I would, he'd say, oh, look at that beautiful church over the cathedral. I go, yeah, it's a perfect waste of space for a parking lot. That would be the most beautiful parking lot if they would just tear that piece of junk down.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I felt. Tear it down with the people in it. That'd be even better. You know, call them all in, tell them we're having breakfast, and then blow the damn thing up. That's how angry I was. That's how hurt. So then as I went through my life, though, I became very militant in making people accept who I am.
Was that a common theme among people that you ran with?
Yeah. I mean, we all agreed that that's what had to happen. If we didn't fight for what we wanted, then nobody was going to give it to us. We wanted to have the right to have a job. You know, you couldn't ask about a question about your sexuality. You shouldn't be able to. You could buy a house. You could rent a house. You could get a loan without having to be rejected because they found out that you were
Mm-hmm.
homosexual. Because that's all of that stuff is real.
Right.
You know, not being able to go to the hospital to see your loved one, that was real. You weren't even a second-class citizen. You were nobody. So, you know, fortunately, the more laws came into play, and so, you know, legal systems began to change, and we could set ourselves up with wills and medical powers of attorney, things like that. Excuse me. Things like that that would get us the right to take care of each other. And so that was good. But at work, you know, I still had the very strong opinion that, you know, I'm a gay person and you're not going to take anything from me because of it. Nobody was going to do that to me.
So that kind of became your ground on which you stood. If I can't be loved by God, then this is what I'm going to be, and you can't tell me otherwise.
Right. Well, that was my identity. I mean, I had known it all my life. I tried to be with God, and then that was taken, so all that's left is me.
Mm-hmm.
And so here I go. You know, and there was some rough times in there, a lot of them, plenty of them. There was a lot of good times, you know.
So you were with Gary
5 years.
And when was that?
Like 86 to 91, I think, when he died. He died in 91.
And so you met him in San Diego?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, at a bar. We met, and he just fell head over heels for me, and, you know, went back to his place and never separated from there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was it for us.
So was he the only lover that you had?
What do you mean? At the time or even after?
Well, what did your daily life look like before and after?
Well, now I had him, so he was my world, if you will. But the, you know, general sex didn't stop. We just agreed to it, and we both enjoyed that part. So
General sex, like bringing
with
other people in?
Yeah,
Okay.
You have plenty of guest hosts. So just like Johnny Carson, you know, you have a guest host every now and then. So that's, you know, all of that continued, but he and I were still, you know, committed to each other, and you know, that there was a commitment there. He was it. He taught me and helped me learn to love my kids, how to be a divorced dad, because he came out of a divorced family. So he showed me, he said, John, you can't forget that you have kids just because you've been hurt. You got to love them. They don't deserve this. You know, this isn't their fault. So we would fly them to San Diego and back, and you know, they had a great little life. And then we got our motorhome and started traveling full time. They traveled with us, you know, and they did everything. So it was really, really cool in that sense. And he kept love in my heart, you know. He kept that warm for me.
So, in retrospect, looking at where you are now, what do you see do you see God in those years at all?
Well, I can from here.
From here, yeah.
Yeah. But not then. You know, once again, he was supposedly not listening to me and hated me. But you know, no matter what, when you're in time of need, you call out to him. And I did. And I know he answered. Don't let anybody ever tell you that God doesn't want to hear from you and he's not going to answer you because you've done too many things. That's exactly what Jesus took on. He knew I was going to do that before I did it. Mm-hmm. You know, before the foundations of the world. He knew what I was going to do. And because I had accepted his son as my Savior, he didn't walk away from me or throw me away. Even if I didn't know that. I particularly at that time, maybe I didn't have to know that. Because I didn't go out and proclaim Jesus, let me tell you. I wasn't one of these people like now you see today where they're chanting about who they're sleeping with and give me rights for this kind of thing, and oh, by the way, and then Jesus loves you, and you got to do all these things, and the Bible is great. I didn't do that. It was one life, not two. I already knew what it was like to live in two worlds in my head before I left in the divorce. You know, I was just completely split in half.
So explain more about that. Were you living a double life when you were married?
Yeah, and before. I mean, I was one way at church, I was another way at work, and then I was me when I was out.
So what did that look like?
Well, it looked like a lot of sex with a lot of dudes, and finding more and more ways to have it, and then going and, you know, I was still a nice person. I was never a mean person or anything. But I knew that I had to put on whatever the persona. When I put on my suit and tie to go to work, that's who I was. And people knew that I was professional and good at what I did. And at home, that's when it started really falling apart, when I couldn't hold it all together. You know, that's kind of where it seems to show up the most, was there, because that was the place that really pointed out you're not supposed to be in a relationship with someone else. This is your home. So that you can't live that life. It will take you out one way or another. And I praise God that it caused a divorce, not a suicide.
A death, yeah.
So, and that was always on the horizon. But I gave up on all of that. I was like, you know, why would I kill myself just because God hates me? Fuck him. I can do this.
Were there ever times when you were seriously suicidal?
Yeah. Yeah, there were times when I was a kid, especially, and then people didn't understand. But it just didn't have enough attraction to me to make it worth going. I mean, like picking up the gun and holding it up and going, okay, this is in a split second, it's over, and then I don't know what's going to happen later. You know,
you said it was more like when you were a kid, like little.
Probably around 12,
okay.
And then moving into teen years.
So what drove you to that back then?
The whole attraction thing, not knowing what to do with it. I mean, you're raised in Catholic guilt. I was a good, guilty little Catholic, and you know, altar boy and all that. And then so coming up through it, it's just all too much. It is two worlds trying to coexist in one head, and it's tough.
Okay.
It's tough.
So I think that's a good stopping point. We'll we'll definitely continue this in another video. So stick around.